You know that feeling when you are trying so hard to fit into a family that you lose yourself completely. That was me for 3 years. I am Marisol, 29 years old, and I spent every family gathering, every holiday, every barbecue trying to prove I belonged in my husband David's world. I thought if I just tried harder, smiled brighter, brought better dishes, maybe they would finally see me as family, instead of an outsider who somehow managed to marry their golden boy. Before I tell you how one sentence changed my entire life, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever felt invisible in your own family. Subscribe, because trust me, what happened next will shock you and might just inspire you to reclaim your own worth. Looking back, I should have seen the signs from day one. David and I had been together for 5 years, total married for 3, and I genuinely believed that persistence would win his family over. David was the baby of the family, at 31 completely adored by his parents, Patricia and Robert, who lived in their comfortable middle-class home in Connecticut. His sister Amanda, 35, was the family princess, who could do absolutely no wrong in their eyes. I came from a completely different world. My family was Mexican-American hard-working people from Texas who built their lives with their hands. My dad ran a construction business. My mom managed the books, and we knew the value of every dollar. David's family was not wealthy, but they had that effortless middle-class comfort, where money was never really a worry. I thought our differences would make us stronger, bring new perspectives to both families. The first few family dinners should have been my wake-up call. Patricia would spend hours preparing elaborate meals featuring all of David's childhood favorites. She never once asked what I might like or if I had any dietary preferences. When I offered to help in the kitchen, she would smile sweetly and say, "Oh, honey, you just relax. I have everything under control." It felt polite on the surface, but there was something underneath that made me feel like an unwelcome guest rather than a daughter-in-law. Amanda had her own special way of making me feel excluded. She created a family group chat for planning gatherings and somehow always forgot to add me. I would only find out about family events when David mentioned them casually. When I pointed this out, Amanda would laugh and say, "Oh my God, I am so scattered. Sorry about that." But it kept happening over and over until I realized it was not an accident. The worst part was how they would slip into these conversations about family memories, stories from before I existed in their world. They would laugh about inside jokes, reference family trips, talk about traditions that went back decades. I would sit there smiling politely, feeling like I was watching a movie of their lives rather than participating in my own family. I kept telling myself they just needed time to adjust. David had been single for years before me, and maybe they were not ready to share him. I convinced myself that if I just proved I was worthy, if I showed them how much I loved David and how hard I was trying, they would eventually accept me. I was determined to earn my place at their table. The holidays made everything worse. Our first Christmas together as a married couple, I spent weeks picking out thoughtful gifts for everyone. I got Patricia a beautiful cashmere scarf in her favorite color, Robert a book about vintage cars since he loved working on his old Mustang, and Amanda a spa gift certificate because she was always talking about being stressed. Christmas morning came, and my carefully wrapped presents sat in the corner unopened. Everyone focused on the gifts they gave each other, and somehow mine were just forgotten. When I finally mentioned it to David later, he said they probably just got overwhelmed with everything and would open them later. They never did. Those gifts sat on Patricia's side table for months until they quietly disappeared. I never asked what happened to them. Amanda had a particular talent for subtle cruelty that she could always pass off as innocent mistakes. She would post family photos on social media, but somehow I was always cropped out, or my face was blocked by someone else. When we all went out to dinner for Patricia's birthday, I suggested this amazing Mexican restaurant I had found. Amanda wrinkled her nose and said, "We prefer normal food for Mom's special day." Normal food, like my culture's cuisine was somehow abnormal or lesser than. Every time I brought these incidents to David, he had an explanation ready. She did not mean it that way. Mom is just set in her routines. You are being a little sensitive, honey. He never once considered that maybe his family was being unwelcoming on purpose. He was so used to their behavior that he could not see how it affected me. The annual family barbecue was a tradition that went back 15 years long before I entered the picture. Robert took enormous pride in this event, planning the menu weeks in advance and making sure every detail was perfect. Extended family would drive in from neighboring states, and for one weekend every summer their backyard would be filled with laughter music and the smell of grilled meat. I volunteered to make dessert, thinking this would be my chance to finally contribute something meaningful. I decided on tres leches cake, a recipe my grandmother had taught me that never failed to impress. I spent nearly $200 on the finest ingredients, real vanilla beans, organic cream, the works. I wanted this cake to be perfect, something that would make them realize I brought value to their family. The night before the barbecue, Amanda sent a text to David that he showed me, thinking it was funny. "Tell your wife not to make it too spicy." I stared at the message, trying to process how someone could think a tres leches cake would be spicy. It was sweet custard and cream. There was literally nothing spicy about it. But somehow in Amanda's mind, anything I made would automatically be ethnic and therefore suspect. I spent extra time getting ready that morning. I chose a beautiful sundress in coral pink, did my makeup carefully, and made sure every detail was perfect. I wanted to look like I belonged there, like I was part of the family. As I carried my beautiful cake to the car, I felt hopeful that maybe today would be different. Maybe today they would see me. The barbecue was in full swing when we arrived. About 20 people were scattered around the backyard, relatives I had met before but never really connected with. Robert was manning the grill with the serious concentration of a man performing surgery. Patricia flitted around, making sure everyone had drinks and that the side dishes stayed full. Amanda held court near the pool, regaling a group of cousins with stories about her recent promotion. When Patricia introduced me to relatives I had not met before, there was always this tiny pause before the word, wife. "This is David's wife, Marisol." Like she had to remind herself what to call me, like the word did not come naturally when referring to me. The relatives would smile politely, and then immediately turn their attention to David, asking about his work, his life, his plans. I tried to join conversations, but it was like being a ghost. People would listen politely when I spoke, then immediately change the subject, or turn to talk to someone else. My beautiful tres leches cake was placed on the dessert table and promptly ignored while everyone raved about Patricia's store-bought apple pie. I watched person after person walk past my cake without even glancing at it. Amanda was having the time of her life. Her promotion at the marketing firm had everyone congratulating her, asking for details, treating her like she had just won the Nobel Prize. She basked in the attention, telling the same story over and over about how she had impressed the senior partners with her innovative campaign ideas. The family hung on every word like she was revealing the secrets of the universe. As evening approached, everyone gathered around the fire pit that Robert had built himself. The sun was setting, creating that golden hour light that makes everything look like a movie. People were relaxed, maybe a little tipsy from the afternoon of drinking, and the conversation flowed easily. This was the kind of moment I had always imagined when I thought about being part of a big family. Uncle Tom started telling a story about a colleague at his office who had just vanished one day. Guy just stopped showing up to work, cleared out his desk overnight, nobody heard from him again. Like he just evaporated. People were chuckling, making jokes about wishing they could disappear from their responsibilities sometimes. That is when Amanda looked directly at me with this smile that did not reach her eyes and said, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." The words hit the air like a physical blow, and then something terrible happened. Everyone laughed. Not just polite chuckles, but real, genuine laughter like she had just delivered the punchline of the year, including David. My own husband, sitting right next to me, laughed at his sister's joke about my worthlessness. It was not a big, hearty laugh, more like a nervous giggle, but he laughed. In that moment, every doubt I had ever had about my place in this family crystallized into absolute certainty. Time seemed to slow down as the laughter continued around me. I felt my face burning with humiliation, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The worst part was not even Amanda's cruelty. It was the fact that nobody, not one single person, told her she was wrong. Nobody said, "That is not funny." Nobody defended me. They just laughed along like I really was that forgettable. I stood up slowly, feeling strangely calm, despite the chaos in my chest. Everyone was still chuckling when I raised my hand like I was in school asking a question. The laughter died down as they realized I was about to say something. "Challenge accepted," I said clearly, making sure every person around that fire pit heard me. The silence that followed was deafening. David immediately reached for my arm, his face pale with sudden understanding of how badly he had messed up. "Honey, she was just kidding. Come on, sit down." But I shook off his hand and looked around at all of them, these people who had just confirmed that I meant absolutely nothing to them. "No," I said, my voice steady and calm. "She was not kidding, and neither am I." The car ride home was silent except for David's attempts to explain away what had happened. "You are overreacting," he said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "You know Amanda has a weird sense of humor. She did not mean anything by it." But I was not listening anymore. For the first time in 3 years, I was seeing everything clearly. When we got home, I went straight to our bedroom and started packing. Not just clothes for a few days, but everything that was mine. My jewelry, my books, my photos from before David. 3 years of trying to blend into his life, and suddenly I wanted every trace of my real self back. David followed me upstairs, panic setting in as he watched me fold my clothes with methodical precision. "Where are you going? We can work this out. You cannot just leave because of one stupid joke." He kept talking, but it was like listening to someone speak a foreign language. How could he not understand that this was not about one joke? This was about 3 years of being treated like I did not matter. 3 years of him choosing his family's comfort over my dignity. It took me exactly 2 hours to pack everything that truly belonged to me. It was shocking how little I had accumulated in this house, how much of my life here was really David's life with me as a supporting character. When I was done, I carried my suitcases downstairs and set them by the front door. David was still pleading with me when I walked to the kitchen counter and carefully removed my wedding ring. The sound it made when it hit the marble countertop was surprisingly loud in the quiet house. I had imagined this ring would be on my finger forever, but looking at it lying there, it felt like taking off a costume I was tired of wearing. "Marisol, please," David said, and for the first time I heard real fear in his voice. "Do not do this. We can fix this. I will talk to Amanda. I will make her apologize." But that was exactly the problem. I should not need him to make his family treat me with basic respect. That should have been happening all along. I drove through the night to Boston, 3 hours of highway and my own thoughts. My best friend Jessica from college had moved there after graduation, and I knew she would understand. We had stayed close even though life had pulled us in different directions, and she was the one person who had always seen clearly what David's family was doing to me. Jessica took one look at my face when she opened her door at 2 in the morning, and immediately pulled me into the biggest hug. She did not ask for explanations right then, just helped me carry my suitcases to her spare room and made tea while I told her everything. "I have been waiting 3 years for you to realize what I could see from day one," she said when I finished. "They never intended to accept you. You could have cured cancer and they still would have found something wrong with you." The next morning, I started the process of completely disappearing from David's world. I blocked his number, blocked him on every social media platform I had blocked his family members. When he tried calling from work, I blocked that number too. I changed my phone number entirely, keeping only the people who truly mattered to me. I called my boss and quit my job as a marketing coordinator. I had been there for 4 years, and while they were sorry to lose me, they understood that sometimes life requires dramatic changes. I withdrew half of our joint savings account, which was legally mine anyway, since we had kept separate accounts, and only pooled money for shared expenses. Jessica was incredibly supportive, insisting I could stay as long as I needed while I figured out my next steps. She had a successful career in graphic design and a spare bedroom that she said had been waiting for me. "Take all the time you need to remember who you are without them," she told me. David showed up at Jessica's house after a week looking haggard and desperate. Jessica answered the door and told him simply, "She does not want to see you." He tried to push past her, demanding to know where I was, but Jessica stood firm. "She asked me to tell you that she is exactly where she needs to be, and that is not with people who think her disappearance would go unnoticed." Amanda posted on social media that week a passive-aggressive status that said, "Some people cannot handle a joke. Family loyalty means being able to laugh together." She did not tag me, probably because she realized I had blocked her, but mutual friends screenshot it and sent it to Jessica. I felt nothing reading it except a deep sense of relief that I would never have to pretend to find Amanda's cruelty funny ever again. Through Jessica's connections, I learned that David's family was discussing my departure in their group chat. Phrases like, "She will be back when she grows up," and "David is better off without all that drama," filtered back to me through people who knew people. They genuinely believed I would come crawling back, that this was just a tantrum I would get over. I spent those first weeks in therapy, something I probably should have done years earlier. My therapist helped me understand how gradually I had accepted being treated as lesser than how I had convinced myself that love meant tolerating disrespect. I started yoga, rediscovered books I loved but had not read in years because David thought they were boring, and slowly remembered what it felt like to take up space in the world. Moving to San Francisco 6 months later was the final step in creating my completely new life. A tech startup offered me a position as senior marketing manager with a salary that was 30% higher than my old job. The opportunity came through Jessica's network, proof that real relationships open doors in ways forced family connections never could. My apartment in the Mission District was small but entirely mine. 1-bedroom hardwood floors and huge windows that let in the California sunshine every morning. I decorated it with bright colors that David had always said were too loud for his taste. I hung my grandmother's paintings that had been sitting in storage because they did not match his minimalist aesthetic. For the first time in years, my living space reflected who I actually was. The friends I made in San Francisco were different from anyone I had known in David's world. Sarah from work was a brilliant strategist who taught me to speak up in meetings and claim credit for my ideas. Miguel lived next door and introduced me to the best tacos in the city, places that reminded me of home in Texas. My yoga group welcomed me like family from day one. No questions asked. No hoops to jump through. 8 months after I left, I started dating James, a software engineer who worked for a different company in our building. What struck me most about him was how he listened when I talked, really listened and remembered details from conversations we had weeks earlier. He asked questions about my family, my culture, my dreams, like those things actually mattered to him. When I made tres leches cake for his birthday, he nearly cried because he said it was the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. The confidence I had lost somewhere in David's world came flooding back. I started speaking up in meetings, proposing new campaigns, taking on projects that challenged me. My boss noticed immediately and started giving me more responsibility. Within a year, I was leading a team of 5 people and winning awards for campaigns that actually reflected my creative vision. Jessica kept me updated on news from my old life, partly because she was curious, and partly because she knew I needed to know I had made the right choice. David filed for divorce after 8 months, finally accepting that I was not coming back. He had tried everything he could think of, even hiring a private investigator to find me, but I had been very thorough in my disappearance. The news about Amanda was particularly satisfying, though I tried not to take too much pleasure in other people's pain. Her marriage started falling apart around the same time I left, and by the holidays her husband had moved out. Apparently he got tired of Amanda treating him the way she had treated me, with constant criticism disguised as jokes, and making him feel like he never measured up to her standards. Patricia had started calling David, constantly asking when I was coming back. She apparently told him that holiday dinners felt empty without me, which was ironic since she had spent 3 years making sure I knew I did not belong at those same dinners. People notice absence in ways they never notice presence, and my absence was creating a hole they had not expected. The family barbecue that year was apparently a disaster. Only 8 people showed up compared to the 20 or more from previous years. Without me there as a target for their subtle cruelty, Amanda had turned her attention to other family members, and people started making excuses not to attend family events. Robert asked David several times where I was, like he had forgotten I was no longer part of the family. David tried reaching out through LinkedIn after the divorce was finalized, sending me a message that said he understood now how badly his family had treated me, and that he was sorry it took losing me to realize it. I read the message and deleted it without responding. Some apologies come too late to matter, and some lessons can only be learned through permanent consequences. I realized that I had been disappearing long before I actually left. I had been making myself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me. I had been invisible in my own marriage, in my own life, because I had accepted other people's assessment of my worth, instead of knowing it myself. My therapist helped me understand that David had never really seen me either. He had fallen in love with a version of me that fit comfortably into his world, without disrupting anything. When I tried to bring my full self into the relationship, my culture, my opinions, my needs, he had consistently chosen the path of least resistance, which meant asking me to change, rather than asking his family to be respectful. The new relationships I built were based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. James loved hearing stories about my family wanted to learn Spanish, so he could talk to my parents, and frequently told people how proud he was to be with someone so strong and accomplished. My friends at work valued my perspective and actively sought my input on important decisions. My yoga friends celebrated my presence like it was a gift, which made me realize that this is how relationships should feel. I was not bitter about the past, just grateful for the clarity it had given me. Amanda's cruel joke had been the push I needed to stop accepting crumbs when I deserved the whole feast. Sometimes the worst thing someone can do to you ends up being the best thing that ever happened to you, because it forces you to choose yourself when no one else will. A year and a half after I disappeared from David's life, I was promoted to marketing director. My team threw a celebration party, and as I looked around at the faces of people who genuinely cared about my success, I thought about that night around the fire pit. Amanda had been right about one thing. If I had disappeared from that life, no one would have noticed, because I had already been invisible. But I did not disappear. I just stopped making myself small for people who were never going to make room for me anyway. I found my way to people who noticed me, valued me, and celebrated my presence instead of tolerating it. Funny how the people who said no one would notice are the ones who cannot stop looking for what they lost. Have you ever felt invisible in your own relationships? Have you ever had to choose between being accepted and being yourself? Let me know in the comments below because your story matters and deserves to be heard. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when life tests you. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they are worth more than settling for people who do not see their value. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who make you feel like you do not matter. You matter more than you know, and there are people out there waiting to celebrate exactly who you are.